They might talk about humor, music, film, books, football and box sets, exercise and maybe even food, trivia and sport, politics and health, sometimes well-being too. On the Life with Brian. On the Life with Brian.
Hello, you lovely lot. It's the Life with Brian podcast, and you're very welcome to join myself, Mark, my co-host Matthew. How are you, Matthew?
Good, thanks, Mark. Good to be back.
And of course, the former Celtic, Manchester United, and Scotland striker Brian McClare. Brian, firstly, how are you? And secondly, I called you a striker there, but striker or midfielder? Which would you prefer to be remembered as?
I was a small utility player.
Right, I don't remember ever seeing you play fullback, mind.
Yeah, I played fullback, Played the last 15 minutes of the FA Cup final 1990 when Ince was supposed to be playing there. But he just kept running forward, so I ended up playing fullback for that last 15 minutes. So I could play badly anywhere.
Our special guest on this episode is quite simply a rugby union legend, captain of Leinster, Ireland and the British and Irish Lions, scorer of more tries than you can shake a stick at, and one of the greatest centres to ever have played the game. It's our privilege to welcome Brian O'Driscoll to the show. How are you doing, Brian?
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning to you as well. All well, I hope.
Yes.
I'm doing very well now. You've just blurred the background there, haven't you?
I did blur a background. I hope it's okay. Just you never know what you might. You might get a snapshot of like the Karma Sutra book or something in the background. So you never know what trouble you get yourself in.
No, well, actually, it's quite amusing because I tried to find something I can ask you you're not expecting. So you didn't blur at something before.
I remember we had
in a previous reencast. You didn't blur it. Now, what I want to know is, first question to you is: are you any good at DIY?
No. I was talking to my wife about it this morning about a friend of hers and about retirement at 50 and she was saying, God, there's only so many fences that you can fix and so on. And I thought, I couldn't retire at 50 because I literally couldn't put a fence together to save my life. So I'm going to have to remain working till I'm old, grey, and not able for anything else. But no, the DIY part of things is definitely not part of my makeup. Albeit my old man is pretty good at it, which I don't really understand how I didn't soak a little bit of info off him. But no, I nearly electrocuted us recently myself by hanging a picture above a light switch. Which was not smart. So yeah, I won't do that again.
So what you're saying is I'm old then?
Well, I was going to say old and grey and have a beard, and I thought I had to take away the beard. Actually, I can't grow a beard. I can't grow one, so I've got beard envy.
You have tried various incarnations of
this is true.
Goatees and different things in the past.
Smigs and tashes and little That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, to go with your blonde hair.
Correct. The internet can be cruel.
Now, what you've got as far as you might still have it. You still got that big red DIY book in that bookshelf.
I do. Oh my God, it's been there. It's gathering dust. It's
quite good. It's brilliant, actually. What you're doing, right? Is because during lockdown, I think there was a thing that was going around of John Barnes in his room for doing podcasts or doing recordings, and you could see videos and books in their bookshelf, right, like yourselves. And somebody had doctored it to have all porn books.
I saw that. I actually saw that.
So you're actually quite clever in the sense of what you've stop strange people like me checking out. I was trying to check it out. I couldn't see it right enough what those books are, but I knew that.
My mother-in-law
I could see that one
years ago. My mother-in-law bought it for Christmas a couple of years ago. She really must know me. She got a nudge from her daughter, obviously going, geez, you wouldn't get him something that might actually help us around the house.
You haven't re-gifted it, no? You haven't given it to someone else?
Not yet. Maybe I'll re-gift it to her in a couple of years' time.
Have you actually opened it?
I did open it when she gave it to me. Like when I took it out of the wrapper, I was like, oh, because my wife is an actress, and so is her brother. And when we got married initially, right? Everyone opened the presents together in their family, but all sat around a table or sat around in a room. And so, one of them handed something to one of her brothers handed it to her, and she'd open it up, and I was like, God, this is a slow old process. And then I handed one of my gifts to like her dad, and I was shot down immediately. Like, no, we all watch each other opening the presents. I was like, what? We'll be here all afternoon. I was like, no wonder they're all good. They're all good actors in their family. I was like, oh, socks and jocks, brilliant, just what I needed. So I think when I did open that one, I probably, that's just what I needed now to build myself a table and chairs in the back garden. So yeah, it hasn't, I forgot it was there, to be honest with you.
I was laughing there earlier, you must have had some quiz team. Did you actually get in the quiz team? There was 5 of you, I think, doing a degree, UCD at the same time while playing international football. Is that right?
There's loads of the boys.
Rugby.
A huge amount of the boys will have 3rd level education, and a lot of them now are still doing it while they're full-time pros as well. Now, there's a lot of kind of links to different universities depending on where you play your club rugby. So, in Leinster, they'll have an affiliation. In fact, their base is in University College Dublin here. So there is kind of an ability to be able to spread out your degree over a 3 or 4 or 5 year term, to elongate a bit, to give you a chance of doing both, of kind of doing semesterized exams rather than full calendar years as per regular students. So all of that, there's definitely an encouragement from a rugby perspective to make sure that you are doing something extracurricular on top of your rugby.
See, I should have been a rugby player. That's what I missed the trick there, because clearly there's a lot more intelligent conversation in your dressing rooms and on the coach than there was in mine,
Well, trust me, we can sing to some really, really horrible lows as well on the coaches. Like that's in our remit too. Don't worry. I've had some conversations that should never have heard the light of day, but yeah, there's a big mixture, like all sports, football, I'm sure is no different. There's different levels of intellect. But one thing that the downturn in 2008 did change was the appreciation for people needing to having alternative options, where it wasn't a bed of roses when they came out of, when players were retiring, it wasn't going to be huge opportunity, and so they had to work for it. And that's why even guys now on their days off are doing placements in accountancy firms and different financial houses just to get experience, so when the time does come for them to hang up their boots, that there's a bit more of a seamless transition, I should say, into the next iteration of what they do.
With regards to that, can I ask you about when you came to the end of your career, you made up your mind, right? You'd had enough, right? I think. Well,
my body made up yes, mind.
I think that's part of it. But would you choose to do it differently, in the sense that you announced in the summer that this is your last season? Would you have changed it and just on that last game, because I know you got injured after 8 minutes, and then you won the game, got won, and you all got a medal, you're celebrating, and everybody's, quite rightly, you're getting the accolades and the applause that you deserve for such a fantastic career. I was just wondering if you're putting more pressure on yourself by saying whatever you were going at, or even the team maybe, that everywhere you went, well, this is Brian's last appearance at whatever ground you were at.
I definitely would change it. My thinking was, I'll get them off my back here now. And if I do say, I had a fair idea that I was going to be done at the end of the year. In fact, the year before, I was even considering whether I'd go one more. And then when they were, kind of handing me early on the season, is this going to be your last year? This going to be your last year? And I just thought, if I just call it here now, because I'm not going to go on for another year after this. If the World Cup had been in 2014 rather than 15, I probably would have tried to get to it. But I knew that it was going to be the end, and said, right, I'll tell them now, and I'll have a year of being left alone. God, how wrong I was, where everything then, every time I was playing somewhere, it was like, oh, the last time here, the last time there. And it became this long goodbye, and I was embarrassed by the end of it. So actually, in my final game, when I did come off injured after 7 or 8 minutes, I was just relieved it was over. I was relieved that I was kind of finally done, that I could park all of that, and there was some nice stuff about calls for one more year and fun stuff from the crowd, but at that stage I was just spent. I was tired of it all, and kind of exhausted around this last time, and it got a bit embarrassed, to be honest with you. And so if I did have my time back, I'd 100% maybe announce it a week before you're about to go, or at the very end.
And you I believe you went to speak to a professional about preparing yourself mentally or emotionally for that actual last game or post-career. Had you already decided, or you knew you were going to go into punditry from during that season, or quite quickly after, or did you have another idea about what you were going to do with regards with the second part of your life?
No, I didn't really know what I wanted to get into. I think the punditry in my head was a bit of a stopgap. It was going to give me a bit of breathing space. It was going to give me an opportunity to stay in the game for a bit, and kind of and still not kind of detach myself completely from what I know the most. But I did go and speak to a psychiatrist, just to understand, trying to preempt that feeling of disappointment and loss and detachment from something that you knew, and to try and normalize it all. So I had seen some friends really struggle coming out the other side of the game, and I thought, I can't have that. So I wanted to try and go and equip myself with the skills, and more so to have an appreciation for the normality of those senses that were going to be coming to me. Not being part of something that you've known all your adult life, from when you were 18, 19 years of age to 35, and then all of a sudden you're gone overnight. You flick a switch and it's finished, and you have to find something else, and you have to embark on, in a solo capacity. The safety net of the team was always there. All of a sudden now you're out on your own as an individual. And so, I was glad I went and got that. It probably softened the landing a bit, but I would say I still found it pretty difficult, albeit I was busy in those early years. I still found that transition a big challenge, because what I discovered in the next walk of life was it wasn't as good as being a professional athlete, and playing in big games and testing yourself week on week in an area that you felt pretty confident and comfortable. So, I was learning new skills as an analyst, as a pundit. And so, I was making mistakes on the hoof, and I was probably a bit too honest with my assessment of what was going on, and I needed to kind of learn my trade a little bit, but do it in real time.
So what did you learn then with regards to, because you're playing at the highest level all over the world, World Cups, Lions tours, particularly in the Irish press being under fierce criticism or praise. So now in Europe, clearly, I think you mentioned that quite a lot of stuff. I didn't used to bother about papers, and I played just before social media. So there wasn't really that kind of all the stuff that people have to potentially deal with now. And I know that was just in its infancy when you finished. But some of the kind of, I think you said, friends or your dad would even phone you up and say, did they see what this person said about you and see what that person said about you? Now, as far as I was concerned, there was only one person whose opinion mattered, and that was Alex Ferguson's at Manchester United. And you learn that, I suppose, as you go along. But then, and I've not done what you do, because I vowed I wouldn't do it, because I didn't like the ex-players, and I know they had to earn a living. I didn't like the ex-players standing up there forgetting that they'd actually played. And there's some of them, when I was playing, that was the case. But I get the impression about a lot of your stuff is that you found a way of kind of softening criticism.
Yeah, listen, there's lots of ways to skin a cat, isn't there? And I suppose you come from an environment where you play a game on a Saturday and you get feedback on a Monday as to how you've done. Actually, you get feedback on a Sunday in the papers beforehand, so the public reads that and kind of makes their opinions and decides upon what they've read as to whether you've gone well or not. And then on Monday, you get the real truth around it from your coaches and your teammates, and you have to go and improve certain things on Tuesday onwards to make sure you're back in the team on Saturday. So feedback was pretty black and white. And I suppose initially, I from a criticism point of view, I would always have been okay with criticism from people. I never held grudges, provided it wasn't a personal attack. If someone just talked about me, the player, what they saw on a Saturday afternoon, I never had any issues because I felt as though I was my own greatest critic. And times that you might have scored a couple of tries and people thought you had a wonderful game, but you were bang average. At least I know that, I know that just because you might, get a couple of scores doesn't mean that you've had a great 80 minutes. Might be important to the overall context of the result, but your personal satisfaction sometimes isn't high on the back of that. And it kind of paints over some of the cracks. And so there was, I was used to kind of black and white, good or bad. And so then in your analysis, sometimes not being scathing, but just being a bit too blunt sometimes. And then I slowly learned over the first couple of years around different ways to kind of navigate my way in punditry. And particularly when talking about old teammates and the guys that I'm still friendly with. So Jonathan Sexton, who's still playing for Ireland now, before it might have been that's a poor quality pass from Jonathan Sexton. Then all of a sudden became that's a very uncharacteristic pass from Jonathan Sexton. It says the same thing, but it just softens it slightly. And players, they read it all now. They read it all. The ones that say they don't read anything are liars, and certainly in rugby. And so. So you have to be mindful of what you are saying, particularly with young players, because I was a young player once as well. And so to try and knock down confidences and to say things in a constructive criticism way rather than in a scathing way where you're gonna knock a player back in any way. So yeah, I think that's been a learning process. I've made some mistakes along the way, but always tried to remember myself as the player that provided it was just about your performance and nothing else, well, that's what you're there to be judged on.
But talking of saying things in the press, it leads us on nicely to a question I had for you, Brian. It's fairly well known that you're a Manchester United fan. So I wanted to turn to an interview you did with the club's My United magazine in March 2016. And you were asked, who was your first United hero? And I quote, Mark Hughes. I had a friend who lived near me. He was a McClare fan, but I liked Hughes. So how do you explain such a terrible lapse of judgment?
I'm just waiting for Sparky to do his own podcast, but this one came along first. So
I think that's a good answer.
Do you know what? I have the 1987-88. It was pre-Premiership, so Football League, and United might have finished 11th that season, but you were top scorer, and so myself and my mate watched it countless times, and he was a McClare fan, and I was a Mark Hughes fan, and it's mad, I don't know how. The reason I'm a Man United fan is because I had cousins from Manchester, and they came over when I was 5 years of age, and they said, "Who do you support?" I was like, "I don't know." And it was obviously a lot of my pals were Liverpool fans at the time, and they said, "You support Man United," and I said, "Right." And that was it from then on in. So I was buying VHS tapes when they were barely featuring in the late 80s, and then. Sure enough, the timing came brilliantly, early 90s, and then you had this phenomenal 20-year period or 15-year period anyway, where they've been exceptional and been the standard bearer in English football. So to go back from my first memory of buying a Man United VHS tape of finishing 11th and one B McClare being top goal scorer. boy, they've come a long way, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got a lot of better players now. But also with that, I think that you admired Sparky's thighs because you've got big thighs as well. I think it's all about that.
I just loved, he'd a real edge to him, right? He obviously scored some great goals, but, you know, it was before strikers were really seen to be throwing themselves around. It was kind of that era of Gary Lineker, you know, never got a yellow card in his time. Alan Smith back then, you know, maybe he was a little bit after that. Was he one yellow card in his career? Whereas, you know, it felt like every other game, Mark Hughes was throwing in kind of the odd late challenge and just letting defenders know that they weren't going to have an easy ride of it. And I could appreciate that. It's, you know, when you're doing something that is different than the norm, but it shows your appetite and you know, your competitiveness. I think there's something to be attracted by in it. So yeah, that was the connect there. Not that I didn't have so much love for you too, Brian.
Good. So you were talking about being diplomatic in your punditry. You just proved it right there. I'm just thinking, would Hughesy have made a good rugby player, you know, with his build and his...
Oh yeah, he'd have been good. Yeah, he'd have been good. He'd have been a good centre. Obviously, you know, being Welsh as well. You know, I'm sure there was some rugby in his life in the early years, but yeah, he had all the hallmarks. Like sport is about competitiveness, you know, and so many good sportsmen and women can kind of cross over to multiple sports if they've good hand-eye coordination, good athleticism. But then ultimately it's about the fight in you. It's about your desire. You know, that counts for a huge proportion of success in sport, is how much you really want it and how much you're willing to push yourself and push those around you to get the most out of themselves. So, yeah, I would definitely feel as though Mark Hughes could fit into that category and could have played, I don't know, probably centre, maybe. I don't know if he had the wheels for the wing. Probably could have played. No, probably could have played back row, but maybe not quite big enough. But yeah, it would have made a perfect 12.
Did you play much rugby growing up, Choccy? Or was that not really a big thing in the schemes of Airdrie?
Well, there were rugby teams, but it was all about football from early time. The only time I remember playing rugby would be at secondary school when it became that period of time. You know, you'd have cross country, you would have football, and then you would have rugby. We didn't have any cricket, and then at Christmas time, my favourite social dance, where you learn to do the gay Gordons and other such things that you're probably doing in Kelso this last weekend, because that's the only kind of places to still do it. But the rugby team played at the same time as the football team, so maybe if they played at a different time, because I think it had some attributes that would have been related to some parts of rugby. As Brian said, I could catch the ball, I could run, I could kick the ball, I could see opportunities and understood the rules of the game because I'd always watched, as it was then, the rugby international games. So I had half an idea how to play, but as I said, played at the same time. So football was always the choice for me. And just there, Brian, when you're talking about Sparky, he trained the same way as he played, you know. So when you talk about those tackles and different things, he used to do that in training. Right. So we used to call him a strimmer, you know, because he would be running, flying around, trying to. If he didn't get the ball, he was getting you know. But he couldn't meet such a contrasting character. He still is. He's very, very quiet, charming, and equal. You'd expect him to be like that, but he's nothing at all. I think you've met him a few times. Nothing at all like that, you know.
No, he's very quiet and kind of softly spoken. And I remember that I was at an Alex Ferguson dinner a few years ago that I met him for the first time, and I've met a good few people, and I'm not really the sort of person to really get starstruck, but he was the one person I thought, oh my God, like boyhood hero. and Kevin Moran was at the event, and he knew that he was, you know, I was a big fan of his growing up, and he said, "Oh, let me take a photo of the two of you." And I was like, "Yeah, brilliant." And so I handed him my phone. And I can only describe the photo looking as though it was taken on a potato. It was the worst photography I have ever seen in my life. Sparky completely blurred, me like barely in shot. I was like, it was my one opportunity in my life to get a photo, to go up on a wall with a hero, and it's no good. And then a few years later, I was doing an event, a golf event with him, and there was a Q&A thing going on, or a quiz going on, and he was on my team, and I was like motioning down to the table to get their photos out to take some pictures of me and Sparky sitting in a team together. So I think you don't grow out of that, particularly your real boyhood, hero, your first, and yeah, it'll always remain the case.
What were you like in training and practice? Did you train the way you played, or?
Yeah, that was a phrase that I would always have lived by. Train as you're going to play. Train as you're going to play, and it's very hard. You can't go full bore in rugby all week, but very hard when the coaches say, "Oh, okay, we just go 50%." It was like 50%. It's because for me, it was very hard if you're going through the motions during the week to then turn it on a Saturday. For me, if you were going full out, throughout the week and giving it everything, then the adrenaline and the atmosphere and everything that added on a Saturday raised your game 10 or 15% anyway. But if you're only working at 80, 85%, then your capacity is limited, come the weekend. So yeah, it was a big focus of making sure that I was always trying to, I suppose a lot of the time, trying to be the best player, trying to be the best trainer, and kind of drive standards as much as you can, because particularly in my early years of captaincy, because it probably wasn't the most comfortable speaker in our environment, I really had to lead by kind of performances and actions, and that's what felt most natural to me.
And would you say that you were a coachable player? Did you listen to the coach all the time?
Yeah, I think I was a good listener. Yeah, I think I was a pretty good listener. I hope I kind of picked things up pretty quickly. I remember I had a bit of a run-in with one of the fitness coaches about 4 or 5 years into playing, and we were in a bit of disarray at the time. We'd gone through a couple of different coaches, consecutively. We're on our third one in 3 years, and anyway, there was something in a drill, and we didn't have a tetchy relationship, but we wouldn't have necessarily always seen eye to eye. Anyway, there was a drill, and someone asked me a question about it that he had explained, and I was just explaining it back to the guy. And anyway, he called me out of the group, and he was like, "Shut your mouth, Draco, shut your mouth." I was like, I was just explaining. He goes, "Come on over here." And we squared up to each other. I was like, Jesus, this is going to go off in front of the boys. And he kind of gave me a shove. And I was like, I actually really respected him for it. I was like, he wasn't taking any shit. And I was like, you're misinterpreting the situation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, after he gave the shove, he realized you can't be pushing players. And he's like, "Listen, I'm going to have to go." After the session, he goes, "Listen, I'm going to have to go and say it to the coach that happened. I apologize." I was like, "There's no need to say anything. It's grand. We're adults." He's like, no, this has to be said. So anyway, he had to go off and speak and talk to our coach. But actually, our relationship after that, I would say, improved no end, where it was like, if someone's willing to step up and kind of show that level of passion for something that they're really into, I kind of dig that, and not take any shit, irrespective from who they're speaking to. So yeah, it's mad how sometimes there's those little catalysts can spark a greater bond or a greater appreciation for what someone does.
And where does the idea of passing the ball to yourself come from? Had you done it before? Had you seen that before?
No, I hadn't.
Were you always thinking about ways of how you can exploit?
Well, do you know what? Yeah, just having fun. Do you know what? The thing about that, the reason that I called it in that game is because Ulster, who we were playing against, love to shoot in defence. Their wingers always love to play high up and in. And so I thought, okay, what will actually find a way to tease them into that and then exploit it out wide? And so what happened is, this is a midfield scrum. It was meant to go out the right-hand side. But I said to my winger, Dennis Hickey, is a good friend of mine. I said, Den, if the ball happens to come to us, you run a short line, we'll run a V together, and then I'm going to throw the ball over your head and catch it the other side. And he goes, all right. So he kind of laughed. Anyway, we're not expecting it. Anyway, our scrum gets demolished. The ball spat out the back, and Chris Whitaker, the scrum half, fires it out to me. And I was like, well, I've called it. Better go through with it. So anyway, it happens perfectly. I run to the V, as does he, and I pop it over his head and run around the side. And actually, I'm running up the touchline, and we should have done better than I did. But I'm running up the touchline, laughing to myself that I can't believe it's actually come off. We should have scored a try from it, but it was one of those moments that you kind of go, "Oh, that was kind of cool. It was nice to be part of it." But yeah, should have made more of it at the same time.
And did the coach have any comment at the end of the game about it?
No, not really. Like, if it doesn't come off, there was times that, I did passes through my legs, that would have come off and been successful. And then I remember I did one in a big game, and it was a nice one, and we scored a try from it. And then the coach was asked about it in the aftermatch press conference. He said, well, the great thing about good players is they pick their moments. And so we probably won't see another one from him, for another couple of seasons. I must have had 10 more on the back of having success from one, and none of them were as good as the original. None of them. So you kind of have an inflated view of your ability as to what you can pull off, but you got to pick and choose your moments.
We're obviously recording this in the middle of the Six Nations. I'm just thinking, Choccy, you must be pretty impressed with the resurgence of the Scotland team. It looks like it could come down to a head-to-head between Scotland and Ireland, maybe.
There's a distinct possibility that it's always the most important thing about any situation in any sport is you beat the English. Now, Scotland have done that a few times. They'll be honest, Ireland is
3 in a row. That's 3 in a row.
Same thing, So I want Scotland and Ireland to do well, but I want England to do poorly. So it's working out a treat so far. Yeah. And it may well come down to that. But Ireland are the best team in the world at the moment, so it'll be a tough game at Murrayfield. But home, yeah, there's always a chance that the result can go Scotland's way. But
it's I did a piece before the Six Nations, and I did call it as Scotland was going to be the most difficult game. I fancied us against France at home. We've got a great record at home in recent years, but people kind of get a sense, because Scotland are in Ireland's group as well in the World Cup, and no one was really talking up Scotland, and then all of a sudden they got going against England and a good secondary performance against Wales. If they can go to France and get a result, which I think will be a big ask. I think it'll be a close game, but I fancy France getting it done. But even still, Ireland coming to Murrayfield with hopes of having a Grand Slam game on Paddy's weekend against England, the Scottish would love to upset that and to get one over on them and sow a seed of doubt for later on in the year in France at the World Cup. But I do think Ireland are a very, very impressive team at the moment. Incredibly well drilled, good strength and depth, and you have a very clear understanding of how they want to play the game, and they've got a lot of points in them.
I mean, I was just thinking, Choccy, you said a few times on this podcast about your hatred for England across all sports.
It's not hatred.
Desire to see them get beaten, should we say?
I like to see them fail. Yeah, that's because I've lived in England. I don't think Brian's lived in England, so it's not, and it's not really the north of England really anyway. Because when we were playing, Brian, the criticism used to come from the southern journalists, the same newspapers, but it was mainly London-based journalists that would be giving you stick and all that kind of thing. And then they were the same set of people who would always be saying that, well, we're going to win this, we're going to win that, and be, I think, overinflating the opportunities for particularly in international football. So that used to just annoy me. So, and that I thought, well, I was looking at it from a practical point of view, thinking, yeah, you're decent teams and all that. I know it's I've had, but never going to be quite as good as some of the other teams around about you. So to stop all this bullshit about us coming home and all that kind of thing. So it's just natural for me when I lived in England that I supported everybody. I still do it. Everybody at cricket and everybody else at rugby and everybody else. And it's only one time, Brian, that I've ever supported England in any sport over that 30 odd years, 40 years. And that was a rugby game.
Against?
South Africa at Twickenham.
Okay.
And it was at the end, apartheid, that come to an end, and South Africa's rugby team or group of selectors came to England with a group of players, and every single one of them was white. They just steadfastly refused to pick. There was players that subsequently, but I was thought, I can't support them against and England beat them. So I was quite happy in that particular day. But that's the only time. The rest of the time, I'm whoever they're playing against. I've got a great collection of flags.
So here's a question. So at World Cups or the Euros, are you cheering them on to a point, or just not at any point whatsoever? No. So you don't even want to see it's coming home, getting to a semi-final, and then disappointment.
Oh no, you couldn't live with that. Yeah. You couldn't live with that. You'd have to leave.
The best. I mean. The Euro final couldn't get any better than that. That's wonderful for as far as I'm concerned. That's the perfect scenario. That is perfect. But I would rather not go through that. Right? I'd rather they got knocked out earlier. I'm trying to be magnanimous because I'm watching the games. I'm watching the games in an English pub with some friends, and I'm trying to be magnanimous in the quarterfinals and all. I'm I'm 59 years of age. I'm trying to think of, look, it's not really that important, when all these people are jumping up and down. But I went to watch the semi-final in the same pub, and I loved it. It's fantastic because I hadn't watched any of these games previously with an English audience. They'd all either been at home or a few occasions I've been in Scotland. So the actual watching these people getting really. Well, if at the end suffer, shouting at the television and all that kind of thing, and then for me to go, it's a shame. England were probably the better team, but these things happen. Let's all support France now. They'd be like, "Fuck off, you."
If I showed you some of my text messages from the last Euros, Brian, from Choccy, you'd know for a fact that he didn't want England to do anything, and couldn't wait to.
I don't know if it's the same in rugby, Brian, but they're just arrogant. That's the thing about it for me. It's just this arrogance about there's a divine right to when there isn't. So when England get beat, particularly when they're favourites and at Twickenham, whoever it may well be, I love that because it's like those types of English supporters deserve to suffer.
Did you have that kind of rivalry in the Six Nations games without going as far as Brian maybe? But...
Yeah, I know you did. Like it's in Ireland. I think most of Ireland has the same sense of loving to beat England, irrespective of what sport we're playing in. It's 800 years of oppression will do that to you. So so it's hard to shake that. That said, on Lions tours, an awful lot of kind of the close friendships would have been built with English players. They would have had, we would have had a good bit of commonality and gotten on well with some of those English boys as well. And in the past, I suppose from a rugby point of view, back in 1972, during the Troubles, when Wales and Scotland wouldn't travel to Dublin for fears of the Troubles escalating down there, England did come. They were the ones that arrived, and so we've a huge amount to be thankful for from their perspective. They backed us for hosting the World Cup in 2023 when Wales and Scotland didn't. So, as much as I understand the country narrative is to always want to beat England, and I subscribe to that, because England are more often than not one of the best teams in the world as well, and they're worth beating. I also do have this underlying sense that they've been good to us from a rugby perspective. If you take the 800 years oppression out of this conversation, they've being an ally of Ireland's in a rugby context.
Grudging respect, I think we'll call that.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Talking of rugby and football, I mean, rugby's often held up as an example that football could follow in terms of respect for referees, use of technology, that kind of thing. How do you both feel about football learning and implementing these different values in terms of behaviour towards officials and using VAR, the introduction of video? I mean, the common thought is it works in rugby, it doesn't work in football on both counts. I just wondered if you think that. I mean, Brian, did you?
They get it wrong in rugby still. They still get it wrong in rugby. It's not a perfect situation. I think VAR is very frustrating. It was brought in and it was meant to kind of clear up situations where I think it's almost created almost a greater confusion at times, where we don't understand if the tech is there, but yet human instinct doesn't feel as though it agrees with it. It seems really weird. Also, I think in sport, you don't want to take that element of controversy out of it completely. Is that not what sport is? That occasionally you get some of this stuff wrong, and that it is human error, but that's part and parcel of what we've grown to love. They're the talking points in pubs afterwards. That referee did a job, and a linesman did a or an assistant referee did a job on you because they didn't call something the way everybody else saw it, or it splits opinion. That is sport. That's what we enjoy about it. And most recently in the Ireland-France game, the referee Wayne Barnes only gave a yellow card to the French prop. Antonio looked like a yellow card. It looked like the most red card of all time. And yet, he got to play, finished out 80 minutes. It was good from an Irish perspective that we still managed to win the game, and it was against 15 men. There was no excuses. But there's definitely I don't think you want to take out that element of chance from sport and what we've all grown up understanding, and technology is a relatively new aspect to our kind of our experience of watching games, but don't let it control it or take it over.
Yeah, I mean, Choccy, you obviously played football for a long time, and you're a big rugby fan as well. Did you feel that there could?
Oh, the cricket. It's any sport that it's involved in, particularly team sport. It's ruined it. That's the bottom line. Ruined it. There's only two important groups of people in team sport, and it's the players and the supporters. The coaches and managers have tried to kind of push their way in now, but they're not really that important. So it's the players and the supporters. And when that event occurs, a score, a wicket, a goal, that's taken away from everybody now. So that's the most joyous part of being involved in rugby. I've never seen Brian crossing that line and not smiling, or throwing the ball in the air and not enjoying yourself. I never saw nowadays they're all looking around to see, hold on a minute. Yeah. Because you'll know fine well that you suspect it might be a forward pass, but how forward was it? And that joy is getting taken away. I was talking to someone the other day who goes to watch a football team that watched all their life, and they won't celebrate until it's actually been cleared by VAR. Now that for me, that's just killed the game for them, and it kills it for the players and kills the supporter. Spoiled it. The second part you're taking back now, and you've touched on the same thing, Brian, is that who's drawing the lines, and how do we know they're drawing the lines in the right places? And what team do they support? Have they got a bias? Yeah, so I know for myself a lot. I'd like to think it was completely clear that I might rule a goal off for England. I might rule a try off for England just because of my thoughts. And sometimes, you try to be clear, but I'm saying the same thing. So if it's a rabid Manchester United fan or a rabid Liverpool or rabid Chelsea in a particular game, have they drawn the lines in the same place? Are they made the same thickness? I don't know. I have no idea what happens in that. But for me, it's just ruined the game. You're just sitting there watching the game and then hoping is it a goal, it's not a goal. And then by that time, that joy of actually the event is gone.
There's the exact same situation happening in rugby at the moment, and we accuse the French broadcasters of being of kind of playing games a little bit, where when the TMO is asked for replays, that the French directors might only play in certain replays that are that don't kind of give full context to what the outcome might be. So I think there was a case in the Ireland game where it was no different, where whoever the operator was only saw an angle after the try had been awarded, after the goal kick had been taken, and then after the restart had begun, and so the referee couldn't bring the game back. So it does. Whose level of bias actually has an impact on the overall outcome about what images are shown, and then as a result, what outcome is derived from it.
One thing that's so often accused of footballers is their sort of lack of respect to referees. Choccy, I just think, how do you feel? Because famously in rugby, there's a huge amount of respect.
Yeah, I think again that's something that you are taught and from a very early age, and I think that probably you learn from seeing your peers playing, whether that's where you're going to football matches or you're watching football matches on the television. So that's the kind of thing that just keeps continuing. So certainly when I was coaching with the young kids in Manchester United's Academy, we stopped all of that. We stopped ourselves behaving in that kind of way. We stopped shouting at referees. We stopped getting onto the assistants, and then we stopped kind of having discussions or banter or arguments with the opposition coaches, and telling the players that if you foul somebody, pick them up, dust them off, and apologise. The reason for that was that we were hoping, we were expecting that some of those players are going to play in European football. When you play in European football, their idea of what is a foul and their idea of behaviour is different. So you can't be going into big games. So Brian's playing the semi-final of the Heineken Cup or final of the Heineken Cup. You can't be going in to the game and after 5 minutes, one of your players has got booked for arguing with the referee, because you see a lot of the European games, they don't take any shit, they just straight with a card. So you're going to play the rest of that game with the thinking, well, what do? Do I take that player off and change the whole dynamic or potentially the tactics involved in that particular game? Or do you try and teach them at an early age? And what we found, Brian, was that we actually started getting decisions from referees. They'd not had this before, and even in youth football, we were going, that's never and the referee would go on you, because it was like he's getting this in his ear from all the players on the other side and the coaches and all that kind of thing, and it became beneficial. One of the problems is when you've got the manager telling you, you get onto that linesman, the very first minute, you got onto him because he's whatever it is the manager thought he was. So I was told to go on and berate the linesman. I got booked right at the beginning of the game. But then apparently it was somebody else's choice. So I'm going, well. So when the secretary wants to fine me for dissent, and I'm going, well, hold on a second. I was just following the manager's instructions. He wouldn't do that. Well, go and ask him. And I didn't get fined because the manager confessed that, yeah, I did task them to do it. Maybe not as angrily and as enthusiastically as I took the task on board, thinking, well, the manager's told me to do this, I'll just say whatever I want to say, but I got booked for it. But no, I think that because of that, you have to find a way of, and I think it's right, it gets. Again, talking about television, Brian, particularly in football, they'll always pan to the player who's upset with the referee decision, and you can literally and quite clearly see that they're swearing or calling the referee something. But they might be, but you get that impression that he's standing right next to the referee, whereas he's not. The referee's already ran back 20 or 30 yards, so the referee can't probably hear him or not really bothered. But I think sometimes, that the referee should that should be a thing, that particularly in if you think you're being abused verbally, that and the players will learn. They've got to learn, because they're either going to be hit financially or not play.
Yeah, well, why don't they? That's the thing to do, surely, right? Exactly, is give referees greater power.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they should just make the decision, and you'll stop doing it, and your coaches will tell them, look, you have to be careful. And because they will do it in the European games, right? No doubt they'll be saying, look, this referee, this thing. But then you have that thing last weekend about Barcelona paying an ex-referee a fortune to find out what referees and assistant referees were like. That's how the margins of success are now in professional sport. How can you find that again? They were trying to find it by thinking, well, what kind of person is it? I'm not suggesting they're doing anything else, but how their performances are and how can you gain advantage from that, or from the knowledge.
Well, on a Friday after we had, before we did our captain's run, we'd have a team meeting, and I don't know whether they're still doing it now, but we would, we might run through 3 or 4 of their key individuals and just run through some of the key points, what their favorite plays are, 100% right arm carry or left arm carry, whether they, chop step off left or right. But what we'd run through is the video of the referee as well as to what they're hot on. So you'd have 4 or 5 different components for the game the next day to go, okay, Wayne Barnes likely to blow a penalty within the first minute for not rolling away from a ruck. Tackler has to roll away. Don't be caught. Don't be that guy. We've warned you. Don't be that person. So, certain referees have traits that they go to and they hang on to, even though their referee kind of managers are giving them a dictate as to what specifically at a particular time they need to focus on. They all have bugbears themselves that they will penalise immediately. So there's huge analysis done on individual referees now to be able to understand what they are thinking before they actually blow their whistle.
This point that you make there of gaining an advantage, I was thinking the other day about this. Now, Brian, you featured in a game that the sort of famous incident in 2009. I'm referring to the Bloodgate incident with Harlequins Tom Williams using a blood capsule to instigate a late substitution to their advantage. I've been thinking recently, what do you think about the potential for concussion substitutions in football and potentially the same thing happening? Last minute someone happens to get concussion, so a set piece specialist could come off the bench and take a penalty or a free kick. Do you think there's room for exploitation there, Choccy, or am I being too cynical?
I think when it comes to rules, the first thing that most coaches will do is try and find a way of circumventing those scenarios. And there will be people who will try and take advantage of such things. I mean, quite clearly, the incident you're talking about bloody is cheating at the highest order, But again, he didn't decide that, He didn't wake up in the morning and decide at some point in the game that first of all, does he get such a thing? Do all rugby players have them in their toilet bags? Like, when they go to take it onto the pitch and then create that sort? No, somebody gave it to him, and somebody gave him the instruction that if at a certain time there is a fear, whatever, and that's what happened, right? So, quite rightly, it was pulled up upon, because I'm sure that Brian playing the game must be looking, going, "Hey, that's not real," or whatever. That's not a.
Well, you're playing in real time. Yeah, you're playing in real time. You don't really know what's going on. You're just focused on your own performance. But you're right about the manipulation of rules. There's a couple of times that it's happened. So in 2012, I tore my meniscus, my cartilage, 8 days out from a Heineken Cup final. And anyway, I got an operation the next day, and I thought I need to play in this final still. And so I did. I worked on it all weekend, and then by Wednesday I was back running, and it looked like I was going to be able to play. And so I played in the game on Saturday, and strapped my knee up in a big way. But about 55 or 60 minutes into the game, I was getting cramp, and but luckily my sutures had burst, and so there was blood trickling down my leg. So I went over to the referee, Nigel Owens. I was like, "Ref, I've got some blood here, so we need to get a blood substitute on." So I ran off the field, got a blood sub on. I got a massage in my calf, which was cramping up for 10 minutes. Got worked on that, and then back on 10 minutes later, blood cleaned up, and away you go again. So you work the rules to your favor as much as you possibly can. There was another situation in 2009 where a game went to penalty kicks in a semi-final. Before we were waiting in the final for who was it? Leicester and Cardiff. Anyway, there was a French scrum half called Julien Dupuis who had been subbed off. Anyway, one of the boys had a bloody nose, and with a minute to go in extra time before it went to kicks, they subbed him off and called for Julien Dupuis. No one could find him anywhere. He's in the dressing room having a smoke. And literally was like, Julian, come on, we need you for his boots off as he's come running down the touchline, the smoke in hand out just before coming out the tunnel, stamps it out, ties his shoelaces up, and then knocks over the penalty kick or the conversion, from in front of the sticks as one of the successful ones. And they went on and qualified for the final. So there are situations where you'll always find a way to manipulate the rules that are in existence, but there's manipulating rules and there's blood capsules. So they're two very different things.
And the thing again as well, Brian, you'll be well aware of that, is that the rules are the same, right? So the rules of rugby and the rules of football are the same rules and applied the same way. What you find is that, the same rules, they have a different interpretation of those rules depending on which country you're playing in. So Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England have all the same kind of idea of how you play the game, a kind of Corinthian spirit, and you should abide by the rules. The French have got a completely different idea about how those rules are. The Italians have got a completely different idea, and it's just their culture. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's the way that they have always been interpreted the rules and how they've been refereed throughout that. And a lot of that's where you've got to understand, maybe when you're going to play in Rome or you're going to play in Paris, look, this is a different situation we're going to be facing. I would assume it's the same in Australia and New Zealand, and it's not better or worse. It's just their interpretation, and you have to be prepared for all those situations. But like you said, cheating is appalling, And to be remembered, imagine that being your legacy. You were the one who cheated in a game of rugby,
Well, the other thing on that as well is, like, we were, obviously, it was a quarter final. It was the first year that we won the Heineken Cup in 2009. And imagine, if Nick Evans, who was substituted on, imagine he had knocked over that drop goal and they'd gone through to a semi-final. Imagine how unjust that would have felt from our perspective. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, but it could have been an awful lot nastier had the result been different. And so, it's, we're all there to try and test the limitations as to, the laws of the sport and laws of rugby, whereas, there's a line that you just can't cross. And that was definitely one of those occasions.
Life with Brian, life with Brian, life with Brian.
Literally none of you out there has requested another one of our daft quizzes, but we're going to do one anyway. This one has imaginatively been called The Lives of Brian's. And it goes like this. Just like a penalty shootout, you both get 5 alternate goes each. Winner is the person with the best score at the end. And if there's a tie, you each get to share the trophy because we can't be bothered making up a tiebreaker question. And your specialist subject for this clash of minds is Brian's. We'll give you a statement about a famous Brian, and you have to tell us if that statement is true or false. If it's true, please say Brian. If it's false, we want you to say lying. Do you both understand the rules of the contest?
I think so.
And no cheat after what we've just said, no cheating.
Yeah, no, we don't. We can't manipulate the rules because we don't know what the rules are. So.
All right. Well, as always, our guest gets the honour of going first. So, Brian, we're starting with sporting Brian's, and what better way than this? Brian McClare, former Manchester United and Celtic footballer, once had a walk-on part in Coronation Street buying Shoot magazine from Rita Fairclough's paper shop. Is that Brian, true, or lying? False?
I'm going to say it's Brian.
I wish.
Oh,
I wish that was Brian.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's false. It's a lying.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I could remember that anyway, even if it had happened. So.
You would have, if you'd done that, Brian. You'd have been an even bigger hero of mine. But
oh well, actually, my son's girlfriend was on Coronation Street last week, so there you go. So,
oh well, yeah.
Oh,
if we'd known that, we could have put that in the quiz. Okay.
Yeah.
Choccy, your chance to take the lead. So, Choccy, your Brian is, of course, Ireland and Lions rugby captain Brian O'Driscoll, who in his teens competed internationally for Ireland at Subbuteo. Is that Brian, true, or lying, false?
That's lying.
It's lying, yeah. Saw straight through that one. He
was outside all the time. He was never inside. He was outside. I know that.
Correct.
He was outside.
Correct.
There's no chance of him playing Subbuteo.
No computers, no Subbuteo.
Right. Okay. We're going to move on to boy band Brian's. Okay, so Mr. O'Driscoll, yours is Brian Harvey, erstwhile singer of 90s teen sensations East 17, who once ran himself over with his own car, blaming the accident on eating too many jacket potatoes. Is that Brian or Lion?
That's
Yeah.
He definitely ran over himself. I wasn't sure about the jacket potatoes, but he definitely ran over himself. I remember that. So definitely Brian.
You got that one. That was probably a bit too obvious, that one. Excellent. Well done. So that's one.
I didn't know the answer to that. So
see. Well, let's see what you get on with your former band member, Choccy. And it's former Westlife band member, Brian McFadden, who is a second cousin of Steve McFadden, the man that plays Phil Mitchell in EastEnders, although they've never actually met in person due to a long-running family dispute. Is that Brian or Lion?
Oh, I like that one. Brian.
Ooh, he's blazed it over. Brian shaking his head. So did you know that one?
I would have said I think that was too elaborate.
I've
never heard anything. I've never heard that before.
You don't give us that after you know the answer.
He was, in fairness, he was shaking his head as we were reading the questions. So I
don't like it. He could have been kidding. He could have been trying to catch me out. I'm not falling for these tricks. I'm not falling for that throwing the pass to yourself one.
I'm back in the game here. I'm back in the game. I'm excited again.
It's still 1-0, isn't it? And we're level on kicks. So, Mark?
It is, yeah. So, Brian, let's see if you can move into the lead. So, we're moving on to acting Brian's. So, we're giving you veteran English actor Brian Blessed, he of the booming voice and the long beard. Mr. Blessed is a renowned adventurer, having climbed or attempted to climb some of the world's highest mountains. But he's also the oldest man to reach the magnetic North Pole on foot. And when he got there, he punched a polar bear in the face. Brian or Lion?
That's just, there's too much in that. There really is too much for that to be a Brian. It's so specific. Punched a polar bear. That's a lion. I'm sorry. You can't punch a polar bear in the face.
Well, actually, it's a Brian.
For God's sake. What? I thought you were a polar bear in the face.
I thought you were going to say it was so specific it had to be true, but you went the other way.
No. Apparently, a polar bear stuck its face in his tent and he whacked it on the nose. So, yeah, it's true.
For God's sake. Okay.
Oh, so we're still 1-1, aren't we? And this is your chance, Choccy, to take the lead. This is a low-scoring shootout, this one.
It's exciting.
Choccy, your thespian Brian is Bryan Cranston, star of US TV show Breaking Bad. Now, Bryan Cranston once saved the life of a former US President George W. Bush in college when the latter started choking on a chicken wing at a frat party. True or false? Brian or Lion?
Lion.
Oh, no, he saw straight through that, and he's right. It was false.
I think it was a chicken wing.
It was a drumstick.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever choked on a chicken wing, Brian. I mean, because you eat the bones anyway, so you couldn't.
All right. Okay, so you've got a pull level now, Brian. So we've got rock music Brian's next up, and yours is Queen guitarist and rock legend Brian May, who was awarded a PhD in astronomy from Imperial College London for a thesis that took him 36 years to complete. Brian or Lion?
I think I heard about him being into astrology. I'm going to say 36 years is too much, isn't it? I don't know. Brian.
Oh, yes, you took yourself into that, out of it, and back into it again. You're right. He was a Brian, yeah.
That was the longest run-up to a penalty I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He'd have been overturned with the new rules now. He'd been timed out.
Very good. Okay, so we're at 2-2 now, so we're level. So over to you, Matthew.
Okay, Choccy, your rockin' Brian is Canadian singer Bryan Adams, who, as his 45 recalls, was indeed in a band in the summer of '69, from which Jimmy quit and Jodie got married.
That's Lion.
He's good at this.
He is good.
We've done many a quiz down the last couple of years with many guests, and Choccy's usually terrible, but he's obviously been practicing.
Yeah. So he's gone 3-2 up, is that right?
3-2 up, yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, we're up to the fifth question each.
So I can't lose then, can I?
You can't
lose. No.
No, I can't.
No. All right. So we're going to round off the quiz with a pair of cocks. No, not me and Matthew. But a couple of Brian Coxes. So Brian, yours is Professor Brian Cox, who knows a lot about space and time and all that, and tries to educate us on the topic on the telly. He played keyboard on D. Ream's massive mid-90s dance hit, Things Can Only Get Better. Brian or Lion?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that is Brian. I think did I hear that? Yeah, I'm going to say Brian.
Oh,
Yes,
do you know
Brian.
what? I've thrown you a dummy.
He said
No,
he
he
was
didn't play keyboards. He didn't play keyboards.
Yes, but
He did play keyboards with D. Ream, but he didn't play on their most famous hit. So
God,
apologies.
almighty.
I've thrown you the dummy and given you the swerve there.
That is.
that's dirty.
Even the most ardent of Brian Cox fans wouldn't have known the specifics around which tunes he was on or not. Come on.
I don't think Brian Cox knows the answers to that.
That's true. That's true. Exactly.
Talk about.
He's going to be listening and going, really? Jeez.
I can't believe you came off your line way too early.
Sorry about that.
But,
Sorry.
You don't need to answer that
Jersey
question.
Dudek stuff. That was.
Well, we do need to finish off, just to make it fair. And to finish off, Choccy, you got Scottish actor Brian Cox, who was once on the books of Dundee United, but after an altercation in the dressing room with manager Jim McLean after a reserve team game, was subsequently thrown out of the club and never played professional football again. True or false?
Well, a Lion. He's about the same age.
Yeah.
He's about the same age. Jim McLean. He couldn't have played under him. You know? Lion.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. It's Lion. Yeah, well deduced. I mean, if you throw Jim McLean in there, you could always, anything could happen. But,
Yeah.
but no. So I think you make that. Was that 3-1?
Yeah, 3-1.
4-2? I don't know. Something like that.
Was it 4? Did I get 2 right?
4-2.
I think-
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay.
4-2. Well,
4-2.
congratulations, Choccy. You, I'll send you another mug to add to your collection.
Just before we go to the mailbag, I've got one more question for Brian, and it's a very critical question. Is who noticed that you brought the wrong dog back home?
Me.
You. How long did it take you?
Well, when I
You got to tell the whole story. I've just
Okay.
getting you there.
all right, so my missus asked me to go and pick up the dog from the groomers, and I was in a bit of a hurry because I was coming from down the country, and I was like, and I had a call to be back on. Anyway, I did it. I was on the phone to someone at the time, and anyway, I went into the groomers, and there was a new girl there, and I said, "Yeah, can I pick up Phoebe, please?" And she goes, "Okay, Phoebe. I don't know which one this is because my wife had dropped it in." And I was like, "Okay." And they always look a bit different when they've been groomed, right? So anyway, dog comes out and I look at her. I was like, "I don't think that's her. No." And then I see it's Willie. I was like, "No, that's not her." And then another dog comes out and looks sort of like her. And I was like, "Phoebe?" And the next thing, the dog jumped up on me. I was like, "That's her." Grant. So I'm still on the call. Anyway, I lift her up and put her into the back of the car. And I'm driving back home. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes. And she kind of gives out a weird bark. I was like, "God, she really isn't herself. She hates the groomers. She really isn't sounding like herself." Anyway, I open the back door when I get back to the house and she doesn't jump out. And I'm like, "Oh dear, something's not right here." And it was triggering at that stage. I was like, I don't know if this is our dog. So anyway, I brought her in to the house and she goes running in, and we had an au pair at the time who was only with us about 10 days. And she goes, "Oh, Phoebe." She goes, "Is Phoebe?" I was like, "Oh my God." And my au pair already knows that it's not our dog. And we've owned her for 3 years. So anyway, I run out to the back garden with the dog. My missus on the phone to someone over in America. So she's like, "I'm on the phone to America." I was like, "Okay, is this our dog? Is this Phoebe?" She goes, "What?" I said, "Is this Phoebe?" She puts the call on hold and she goes, "Phoebe." "No, bring it back." So back into the car, back to the groomers, and "Hi, can I have my dog instead of this Phoebe?" And so I was just thinking what our dog must have thought as I was taking another dog away with. and I now appreciate that they look quite different. But it was actually weird. Weirdly, I was in the park the other day with my kids, and a dog came walking along. Teenager was walking the dog, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's the head off our dog, Phoebe." And I was like, he goes, "Oh, you're Brian O'Driscoll." I was like, "Yeah, how's it going?" I was like, "Your dog's so like ours." He goes, "I know." I was like, "I've seen pictures on your missus' social media of your dog. It's the head off it." I was like, "Oh my god, if I'd taken that dog home, it would have been realistic." But the one I did take home, not so much so.
Please tell me you're not asked to go to the dog groomers anymore and pick up.
Listen, of course I'm not. Yeah. And I don't ever get what's requested in the shopping either.
Yeah, do a job badly, and you'll never get asked to do it again.
Correct. Yeah. So no, and now like for weeks afterwards, it was like everyone walking down the street was like, "Oh, is that your dog?" I was like, "Come on, you got to go. Give me a better one than that. Give me a better one than that. I'm ready to laugh, but hit me with something good."
It's only going to get worse after the thousands of people that listen to our show.
Correct. I won't be safe over in Scotland or in Manchester or anywhere when I'm walking my dog.
You just get it anyway, whether you've got your dog or not. That's just all part. In Scotland, you'll just be asking. When you're wandering about Edinburgh in a couple of weeks, that's what people will be coming up and saying to you,
There you go. Yeah.
My class mailbag. My class mailbag. My class mailbag.
Matthew, have a rummage around in the mailbag and pull a few questions out have been sent in by our listeners, please.
Okay, we're starting with a rather heavy topic here. Martin Lee asks, is it acceptable to have a favourite crisp that isn't Tayto cheese and onion flavour? He says Irish people do get very defensive over Taytos, don't they?
They do. I think if you're having a cheese and onion crisp in Ireland, you're mad if you're choosing an alternative to Tayto cheese and onion. Like there's an equivalent King crisp, but they're nothing on Tayto. So I think you can't specify around crisps at large. I think you've got to talk about the different flavors within the crisp market. And if you are eating cheese and onion, you got to eat Tayto. But I'm partial. I'm not really that much of a crisp eater, but I'm a salt and vinegar guy, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm not overly picky. Pringles, I'll eat them.
Very diplomatic, right? You're too diplomatic for this.
The long and short of it is Tayto, cheese and onion, yes.
Well, having said that, when I was at an event in Dublin last summer, Brian, and one of the guys had come down from Belfast under the instructions to buy cheese and onion Taytos in Dublin because they taste different in Northern Ireland.
What? Really?
Yeah, that was it. He had to go back with a huge bag from Dublin because she's saying that the whatever they're produced in the north of Ireland, they don't taste the same. So there you go.
A pint of Guinness I can appreciate on with that, but some Tayto, cheese and onion, I'm not so sure.
Potatoes are important to some people, So
what's your favourite? Choccy, what's your crisp of choice? Go-to crisp of choice?
Golden Wonder cheese and onion.
Yeah. Okay. Going back a few years, do they still do Golden Wonder?
But what I do is when I buy crisps, I crunch all the crisps up into little tiny pieces.
Yeah, but you only do that so other people can't come and take one from your bag. That's why you do.
And then I pour a packet of salted peanuts inside them and then mix them all around, and that's how I eat my.
That is true. I have seen.
But I think it's like if you get annoyed by crisp rustling, then that must be really irritating, because it makes a hell of a racket.
Yeah. You don't want to be doing that in the cinema.
No. I might try it the next time I go to the cinema. See if I can get some space round about me,
Chris Malloy asks you, Brian, he says, did you ever consider a move to Munster in 2005-06 when Ronan O'Gara was showing an interest?
No. Strong no, hard no. No, like they were playing good rugby and they were playing they were on the cusp of some success, but even though my mother is from Munster, I could never have seen myself playing in Munster Red. No.
Fair enough. I was thinking before I read this question out, I was thinking earlier, Brian, did you ever have your head turned, in your peak of powers at United, I mean, not just. I mean, for both of you, this could be for. I mean, Choccy, did you ever get a phone call when you were banging the goals in for United and maybe Liverpool, with Liverpool?
No.
Never.
No, I didn't. There was no other. Well, maybe there was, but I mean, but I was not aware of any of it. No, so.
I assume it's a tricky one. Like you say, Brian. You go into if it's a side that's just not, you just can't face. It's just a big.
And that's why I think players that have bounced around. Obviously, money talks, but players that have bounced around, kind of clubs, huge rivals. I just don't get it, and I can understand the Gary Neville treatment of Peter Schmeichel when he went across to City. At that time where there's no friendly stuff where you're gone to one of the main rivals. I wouldn't be a big subscriber to that personally. So you got to do what you got to do. If you're a peripheral player, you're not getting game time, and another club comes along. Ultimately it's a livelihood. But thankfully I was in the position that I was able to hang tough, and then we had some success with my own home club team.
Yeah, I think it goes a long way in the eyes of supporters. And talking of which, Cumbrian Dave sent in his usual question, as he does every episode.
This one's for Choccy. Brian, at the recent event that you and some of your old ex-teammates had at the Lowry Hotel to celebrate the anniversary of United winning the league in 1993, what was your favourite part of that event?
It's always nice to meet up with people again. It's just a pity that because the United Cup game had been rearranged for 8 o'clock, on which I'm delighted never not to be involved in football. Who wants to play any sport at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? That the gig got changed from the evening to the afternoon. Quite a lot of the lads were working in hospitality at the game, so as much as we had a nice time, it was good to catch up with people, and I think we got a few laughs. It would have been a much better time if we'd spent the whole evening together. Maybe having a couple of pints of Guinness, which may or may not have made it more entertaining. But it's nice to see. It was nice in I think for people who were there in that it was those guys who had been played a big part in the first Premier League win, just telling stories that people would probably never heard, because kind of stories that happened in between all of us, So I enjoyed the event, and I think that there was. The people who were there enjoyed it. So I think there may be another one later on in the year.
Do you have a WhatsApp group with that crew?
No. Yeah. I'm the miserable one, Brian. I'm the one that wouldn't keep
They do.
Yeah. They've got one. Yeah, they've got one. I'm excluded.
I was just thinking, when you did that reunion dinner, did you think that your beard would be all over the national press the next day, as it was?
Well, it was all over the week before, though. For some, it's the story goes, Brian. Did you recognise this guy? And I'm similar to you. I get recognised all the time, irrespective of where I've got glasses, a beard, or my hair long or short. So it's just like people go, "Oh, Brian McClare." And then what I say is different from you, because what I tell people now when they ask you, because it's part of my enjoyment, Brian, is that they'll go, "Excuse me, are you Brian McClare?" And I'll say, "Well, I used to be him." And they'll pause and stop, like thinking, "Well, who are you now?" Or
by which time Brian's legged it down the road. So
I'm away, So it's just part of the thing about it, So it mystifies me. Really, what it is man gets old. That's it, But I was all over the place, so it's just.
Brian was trending. Choccy was trending #1, trending on Twitter for a few hours on a Saturday night, and me and Mark both looked at each other and texted each other and said, "Oh my God, is he dead?" But
I saw the photo as well. Geez, Lee Sharp still looks unbelievably young. Holy shit!
Thanks, man.
Next to Dennis Irwin.
Oh, Dennis, he is. Yeah.
A rugby. Do you do a lot of those sort of old school reunion type things?
We had one. We had one a couple of months ago, where like a 10-year reunion on our 2000, yeah, obviously because of COVID, we didn't get to do the 2011, 2012 Heineken Cup victory reunion properly. So they just did the 2 years into one. And so, yeah, we had just before a Leinster game, and we had a function, and it was cool catching up with everyone. And you kick back into kind of the norm of dressing room and having a laugh and taking the piss out of one another. They're good for the soul, those ones, where you because we're all grown up and have families and everything, but ultimately there's still that inner child in you. So when you come back with like-minded people, it's lovely to be able to revert back to that person 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, it was we had great laugh, and good few pints, and then some people did the dog in it, and yeah. But now I'm getting good at that. I'm getting good at the eject cord of just on the cusp and getting home.
Okay, so with that, we're going to boot this episode into touch, and all that's left for me to do is to thank everyone. Of course, Brian O'Driscoll, for giving up his valuable time to be with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Choccy and Matthew, thanks to you both. It's been fun as ever.
As always, until the next one. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure. Cheers, guys.
Finally, a huge thanks to you out there for being with us. Please subscribe to Life with Brian on your preferred podcast provider and leave us a nice review if you'd be so kind. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Brian McClare Pod, so follow us for updates and various other bits and bobs. Please also follow the Sports Social Podcast Network, of which we are a member, and enjoy any number of podcasts they have to offer. At the Sports Social or sport-social.co.uk is where they can be found. Right, now that's all done. It's time to sign off. So we'll see you soon.
Life with Brian. Life with Brian. Talking films or music. Life with Brian. Talking TV and food. Life with Brian. Talking trivia and exercise. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Talking politics and football. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Life with Brian.